Check it out. It's the Laugh to Learn podcast. What's going on, everybody? Welcome once again to the Laugh to Learn podcast. Welcome to anyone who's new this week. I would like to thank every single one of you for tuning in and for checking it out. Now, all I want to do when I open the show, as always, is just ask you, please share this podcast everywhere. My name is Jacob Paveo, and that's all I ask from you. That, and of course, you can give it 5 stars on iTunes, and I should have been saying this before, but subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform. Once again, if it's not on your favorite platform, let me know. I'll be sure to do my best to get it there. You can follow me at Jacob Paveo on Twitter, at Jacob_Paveo on Instagram. That's JACOB_PAVAO on that's on Instagram. No underscore on Twitter. And ladies and gentlemen, we have a show this week. If you haven't checked it out yet, I implore you, I beg of you, I plead for you to check out the show I did last week, all on Canadian politics. It was a wicked show. Tons of research went into it, so please check it out. I'm going to be advertising that one for a little bit longer because I know a lot of people didn't check it out because the listens on it aren't that high, not as high as I'd like them to be. But I did publish it a day late, so I know it's kind of out of the usual cycle. I'm pretty bad for that with podcasts I listen to anyways, so I kind of get it. If I publish a day late, I understand why someone may have missed it. But that's enough about last week. There have been some evolutions in the Liberal Party of Canada and in that whole case, but I'm going to let it lie for a little bit, wait until something big breaks that's really worth talking about. But last week I did a little bit of hints into what's going on this week's show. We're going to close talking about the Trump and Kim Jong-un summit, not Kim Jong-un, un as in number 1 in French. Strange name. Anyways, speaking of other podcasts, for anyone who's a fan of the Joe Rogan podcast, maybe you listened to it, but this past week, Alex Jones was on the Joe Rogan Experience. And for those of you who don't know who Alex Jones is, I give you props, and you deserve respect if you do not know who Alex Jones is. And if you do know who Alex Jones is, I know who he is. I knew who he was long before this, so I disrespect you, I suppose, because that would be the opposite of respecting you. But I guess that means I disrespect myself, so it's cool. But basically, if you don't know who he is, Alex Jones is this crazy guy. He just yells and screams. He's like nuts. Talks about conspiracies. He has a show on the website Infowars.com. He sells a lot of shit. Like, this guy makes a lot of money. His show is basically all advertising with these little... It's like 10 minutes of advertising with a 5-minute segment in between each advertising segment where he just goes off on some crazy conspiracies. And once in a while, he talks about something that's legitimate. He's never broken news, but sometimes it's like, okay, yeah, that's legit. But then 9 times out of 10, he's just crazy. So either way, this week it came up on Joe Rogan. He talked about it, and a little bit more on his show about interdimensional child molesters. And you can't make this up. So he blames the government. He believes that the Democratic government was aware of it, and as well as the Republicans, but the Democrats were the worst, and they knew that there were these interdimensional beings that had access to the 4th, 5th, 6th. He counts all the way up to the 11th dimension. He pulls that number from string theory. That's a consensus by those who believe that string theory is legitimate, although a lot of research nowadays is showing that it's perhaps not. But if string theory was real, then there would be, most likely anyways, 11 different dimensions of existence. Now, read about that, because that's a legitimate thing that's cool to read about. It's super interesting. I mean, like the fourth dimension, just look up a hypercube. It's the craziest shape. You can't even imagine a fourth dimension. It's awesome. It's awesome to look into. But he basically believes that these beings come from the fourth dimension into our three-dimensional world. So literally, there's a rapist or a molester, whatever the hell, some creepy dude in some other dimension that randomly in front of Hillary Clinton just goes, pop, shows up like, hey, what's going on? Grabs a small child, disappears back into the fourth dimension, and then all of a sudden, child reappears, having been molested, again, all in front of Hillary Clinton, and he says that they know about it, and they are doing nothing to stop it. Now, I am going to look over the fact that Alex Jones thinks not only is there beings with access to these other dimensions who exist essentially on Earth, but in another dimension, but beyond that, he thinks that the government can do something about it. Because think about it this way. You're walking through the mall, right? There's a small child in front of you. All of a sudden, some fucking dude shows up out of nowhere, just like pop, comes out of nowhere, grabs the child, gone. All of a sudden, child's back, guy's not there. What are you going to do about it? What do you want the government to do about that? We do not have access to the fourth dimension. There is nothing we can do about that. And he's screaming and yelling that they know about it and they're not doing anything. Let me tell you, sir, if you are correct about this, there ain't nothing we can do about it. This is literally like when the U.S. dropped atomic bombs on Japan back in the Second World War. What the hell were they going to do? They watched the bomb fall. Phew. They're like, hey. Uh-oh. Let's hope they don't have any more of those. What was it, 3 days later in Nagasaki? Bomb number 2. That's when they were like, holy shit, we give up. And that's basically what we would do if there were people coming from the fourth dimension. Could you imagine that? You're like sitting there. You're a soldier. We're being invaded by the fourth dimension. Literally, like, there would just be a bullet in your head. Boom, dead. You would just drop dead. It would come from another dimension. You can't see it. You can't measure it. You can't smell it. It's another dimension. Now I sound like Alex Jones. I'm going off. It's awesome though that there's people who actually they seriously believe this stuff, and he's got a huge following, and it's absolutely insane. But in quick conclusion here, I will close by saying, unfortunately, there is no evidence, no hard evidence of a fourth dimension, and lucky for all of us, we don't, apparently at least, have to worry about our children being grabbed from the fourth dimension. So I promise that I will take that comment back the day that someone appears out of thin air in front of me. But until that day, I remain, let's go with, skeptical. Now, our first topic for this week is something that I discussed a little bit last week, but I really want to dig into it because it's a fascinating part of politics. So, public hearings have been a staple of Western politics for a very long time now. However, with modern technology, these hearings have taken on a whole new look, and in my opinion, their very purpose has changed to become something that I'm not really sure any of us should be in favor of. Now, I'm going to be focusing specifically on U.S. congressional hearings because the United States tends to be looked at as the goalpost in politics. Maybe not so much the last 3 years, but they really are. And they also have the longest history to draw from in the form of public hearings. So let's get into it. Now, It wasn't until 1924 that the U.S. government allowed transcripts from hearings to be purchased, and not until 1938 that the transcripts were distributed for free to libraries across the country. So since the 1800s, they have been documenting transcripts of everything, but again, not until 1924 could newspapers and the like buy them, and not until 1938 were they available for free to the public. So the reason for these public hearings, it's ultimately to provide information to lawmakers, generally coming from experts in the specific fields that they're questioning on, or witnesses to help them in lawmaking decisions, which can include impeachment, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a little bit. Now, there are 6 types of hearing. They are legislative, oversight, investigative, confirmation, ratification, and field hearings. But I am not going to get into that here. If you're interested more in what exactly these public hearings are and what they're all about, I encourage you to read up on them, and you can watch them online. That's probably the best way to do it. That's how I really learned a lot about them. I just would be on... They're all over YouTube and stuff, and as I talked about before with... one day getting... Oh, yeah, I should have mentioned my stuff's not on YouTube yet, but when I get onto YouTube, just search for like 3 of the videos, and then in your recommended, there's going to be tons of them. So some can be really entertaining. Usually if you just search U.S. congressional hearing, the main ones that come up are going to be like people screaming at each other or just hilarious answers and comebacks, and, there's a ton of them to watch, and it's super worth it. Some of them are super entertaining. However, I'm going to focus on the format of these hearings since December 19th, 1974, when the first hearing was aired on live television. Now, the decision was made because of all of the public interest surrounding President Nixon and Watergate. That'd be a fascinating topic for me to cover, Watergate. The president was facing a possible impeachment at the time, and of course he stepped down before being impeached. And leadership concluded that the public needed to be able to view the proceedings. They thought it would be more than beneficial, and really it was the only way to be completely clear on what was going on. And after the Nixon hearing, it wasn't until 1986 that cameras were permanently installed. And in my opinion, as of 1986, the entire purpose of these hearings changed drastically. At this point, it would slowly change from a chance for politicians to gain knowledge from experts or to question a witness, a witness to an important event, into a chance for much lesser-known politicians to each get their fair share of camera time and to use it to do their best to spread their name, really, which is quite unfortunate. And I was watching the Michael Cohen hearing from last week. Cohen, of course, is Trump's former lawyer, a lawyer to the Trump company, Trump organization, and he's going to prison for lying to Congress just a few months ago. And it only took 10 minutes for me to realize what exactly was going on here. Because this was a bunch of politicians delivering really shitty scripted lines, clearly trying to be the one who sticks and gets onto CNN or Fox or MSNBC or Facebook or YouTube. Just like I said at the beginning, there's tons of one-liners you can watch. They're super entertaining. That's what all of these politicians want. They want to be that one who ultimately becomes a meme. And the drive to become a meme, and ultimately the public funding that comes from becoming such a trending senator, even if it's for a bad reason, is way too much of a temptation, right? They can raise tons of money just by becoming the guy on YouTube. Like, you can get tons of money for that. So it's really unfortunate, and I should know because I script shitty jokes every week. Now, if you told me that I would have an audience of a few million with the potential to spread to tens or hundreds of millions, if my one-liner at least is good enough, then you know damn well I'm delivering a line every chance I get. I would be like, boom, 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 catch me outside, how about that? I'd be trying everything to get myself in front of those cameras and to keep everyone talking about me. However, in this particular hearing, I have to say that the best line certainly was not scripted, as it came in the form of an answer to a rather strange question which was directed at Michael Cohen himself, a Republican senator, and I have no idea, who cares what his name was, asked, quote, "You lied for Donald Trump, and you've admitted that. You say that Donald Trump asked you to break the law, and you, a lawyer, did so," being Michael Cohen, of course, "only to later call him a moron and unintelligent, that he could get away with anything. Is that right? And if so, what does that make you, Mr. Lawyer?" To which Michael Cohen replied, "A fool." And holy, I loved it. Now, seriously, when you're under that kind of pressure, right? Not the entire, but a large portion of the U.S. Senate is sitting in front of you, right? These are the most powerful people, not only in the country, but arguably around the world. Like, these are super, super wealthy, super powerful people. And this guy thought he got him, right? You called Trump a moron and unintelligent, but you're the one that lied for him. What does that make you? And he just says, "A damn fool." I love it. I absolutely love it. Now, I don't like Michael Cohen, and I think that he should be going to jail because he definitely lied to the American public. He definitely lied to lawmakers. But damn if he isn't quick-witted. And who knows, now that he's been disbarred, maybe we will see him start touring the comedy clubs because, I mean, I'm sure hanging out with Donald Trump for all those years, you have to get used to clapping back. And by all accounts coming out of the White House, he actually likes that. So this guy's probably pretty good at it. But either way, back to the topic, we're left with a dilemma. Because these hearings are required, if we're to be completely transparent. And I believe that lawmakers need the time to listen to and learn from these individuals, as well as the public, right? It is meant for the public to pay attention to. And these are the sort of things that large corporations especially are super involved in, a lot of these these smaller hearings, but they may have serious impacts to, different sectors of business. Now, I don't know how you do that without the showcase. And that's really the problem. And in Canada, all public hearings are televised, just as they now are in the U.S., except for ones that are done at a classified setting, of course. If you're, they have hearings on wars and the like. And of course, that's not going to be televised, as well as they may be doing interviews with someone in witness protection or someone who maybe is standing trial and there's a jury currently sitting or they're putting together a jury to deliberate. You don't want that to be public because it could skew a judge or a jury, of course. So there are reasons for these to be held behind closed doors in a classified setting, but for the most part, they're not. And sometimes we in Canada will see something that makes it to mainstream news out of these hearings, but unfortunately, not enough people seem to really care about politics here, or else it would be worthwhile to our politicians to try and get themselves on the 6 o'clock news. And ultimately, I don't want to see that, right? Right now, we have a channel in Canada, the name of it, I'm not remembering right now, which is really bad. But you can watch sitting in the House of Commons at any point in time what's going on. As long as there's people in there working, the cameras are on, like I said, unless it's a classified setting. So those sort of things are really good, and it's good that our politicians, for the most part, aren't working to get those one-liners. They do sometimes, of course, but it's not as bad as it is in the U.S. because you watch the Michael Cohen testimony, and almost everyone, including politicians who are like very firm in their seats, who are seniors who have been there for years, that just go for these one-line just quips, and it's really irritating to watch. It's almost pathetic, actually. Like, it's sad. And then you see someone like AOC, Alexandria Alexia Cortez, or whatever the hell her name is. She did extremely well at questioning Michael Cohen, and I mean, she didn't pitch a one-liner. She came straight up with questions. You could tell she's been coached and very well coached. But no quips, no one-liners. She got herself on the news because she did a fantastic job. And I think that's the way most politicians, I wish, tried to do it. But when I'm trying to think of a way that it could be done without all this attention given to people who are really just trying to get voted in again, perhaps the best option would be to have unelected staff members asking written questions on behalf of the elected officials. Although, of course, this would give those individuals the opportunity to sell themselves for a later election. Of course, say I'm an older politician getting closer to retirement, and I see someone in my staff who I think can replace me. That's the person I'm going to put in that seat to ask those questions and to get their one-liners in, right? And even if you're not trying to do so, you can just, that's what would happen, because it would be, everyone wants more power, right? Not everyone, but you're putting together a room of 30 or 40 individuals to ask questions in front of the national media, and they're given this opportunity to showcase themselves and their personalities. They're going to do it. 9 out of 10 people are going to do it, because as I said before, there is a lot of money at stake in this. Now, I also mulled over, that's a strange word, mulled over, the idea of removing the cameras and, of course, allowing journalists in with a transcript released afterwards, because you need transparency. You can't do this all behind closed doors, but we're at a point in time where it's nearly impossible for us to get young people out to vote. And removing these hearings from the public eye could not only damage trust, but it could also remove the only access young people have to following federal politics, which, no one's watching the news. They're watching the one-liners on Facebook and on Twitter and Instagram and YouTube. And it really concerns me when I look around online and all of the political videos that I see are these gotcha one-liners clearly directed at winning votes, specifically winning votes from younger people, rather than garnering knowledge and information from those testifying in a public hearing, because that's what the politicians are there to do. They're there to learn, not get reelected. But we've created a vicious cycle where everyone just wants to be elected. Everyone wants a job, and I totally get it, right? I can't say I wouldn't do the same thing. Like, how could I? That would be totally lying. Because if you want to be a politician for your career and you're in the House today, if you don't get reelected this fall in Canada or next fall in the U.S., that's it. Like, you can become like an advisor or whatever, but you've lost your power. You've lost the big money. And it sucks, right? But, I mean, how do you fix it? And, I hope this calms down at least a little bit. It could just be, this new media, specifically social media, could be driving them, and this is how they think is the best way to work with it. Although I would argue that Donald Trump's found the best way to work with social media, and it's simply being brash. And again, I don't see that sticking either. So ultimately, I hope that if anything, these videos give young people the curiosity, at least some young people, the curiosity to look beyond the headlines and to read about what's being actively debated and proposed at the federal level. So the last thing that I want to see is some egomaniac run and win for personal gain and to improve their relevance to society. Oh, wait. So once again, as I mentioned earlier, please, please, please subscribe to the podcast on whatever service you're using. If you have an iTunes account, please jump over there. Give it a 5-star review. Even if you don't like it, just 5 stars of horribleness. Give it a 5-star review and say, I had to rate 5 stars because it's 5 stars of awful. I don't care. I'll take it. I will take it. And share the podcast everywhere that you can. Tell people about it. Word of mouth is fantastic. If anyone's like, yo, what podcast are you listening to? Bro, I'm listening to the Laugh to Learn podcast. Every single Tuesday I listen to it, and it's fantastic. This guy, the host, he's incredible. I wish that I could hear him talk every day. Well, guess what? You totally can, because it's a podcast, and you can play it back. Play it back over and over again. I will not complain. My voice is recorded, so, I don't get tired. I don't have to talk again. It's perfect. And don't forget to follow me on social media. You can follow me on Twitter at Jacob Paveo. That's at JACOBPAVAO. On Instagram at Jacob_Paveo. And, no money, no problems. Because I'm not asking you guys for any cash, nothing like that. All that I want is for you to tell people about the podcast, rate it well, and that's that. A quick update I mentioned in the middle of the last topic there about YouTube. Hopefully this week it's going to be up on YouTube. So either this episode or the next one will launch on YouTube. I don't think they're going to be simultaneous at first. YouTube will probably go up on Wednesday. All of the podcast services on Tuesday, at least for now. I might even have to move YouTube a little bit down the line because it takes a long time to upload to YouTube. When I do it uploading to as a podcast, literally once I export the audio to MP3 version, it's uploaded in podcast form within 5 minutes. YouTube, like even if I have the video ready to go, it can take hours. So usually I upload like just before I go to bed on Tuesdays. I don't really want to be starting to upload a video before I go to bed because there's problems uploading videos all the time. So I'm likely going to do it Wednesday when I get home. But yeah, so look for that. Likely next Wednesday, I'm thinking, for videos to start going up, and they should all be there within a short amount of time. As for the logo, I'm hoping to get it done this week. It was our period end, so at work, so I've been working. I was at work on Saturday this week. Not really any time to put together the image, so the plan is to do that this week, and that coincides with the YouTube videos, of course. As I mentioned, it's just going to be a static image. So yeah, much goodness to look forward to. Hopefully the levels of audio are starting to get a little bit better. I had a few complaints about that they change with the music and the audio. I think I fixed it. It sounded all right to me last week. I'm hoping I can replicate it this week. But as I've mentioned before, I used to have Mate, my co-host from the old podcast. He studied audio production in school, so he used to do it. But now I have to do it on my own, which is totally cool. I'm learning it, but I'm learning as I go. So my apologies if it's not perfect, but much like me, it will one day be perfect. Because I am Mr. Perfect. Well, Mr. Alright. Let's go with Mr. Alright. And please subscribe, share, follow. And now it's time for our weekly news read. And this week we have some awesome news. This is my third try at this first news story because I don't know, there's something wrong with me. But SpaceX successfully launched a commercially built rocket, the first ever commercially built rocket which can hold people from the United States, from Kennedy Space Center down in Florida. This is an incredible feat. It is the aptly named Dragon Crew rocket, and this is my favorite story of the week. Not the funniest, but definitely my favorite because this is the future in space exploration, and this time there were no people actually on board, although this would be the perfect way to kill somebody, as has been mentioned before, because they used what they are calling an anthropomorphic test dummy named Ripley. Now, I did some extracting, and Ripley starts with R.I.P., ends in L.Y. So rest in peace, someone with the initials L.Y. So if you have a friend named Leonard Yee or something like that, you might want to check on them because Elon Musk might have killed them. Now, this was launched as a test because they're going to be sending astronauts up to the ISS, the International Space Station, using the Dragon Crew rocket, hopefully in July of this year, which I'm super excited for, I've been contemplating for my trip, my vacation in the summer, if I want to go to Florida to watch it. But I'm not really sure because I don't like going south in the winter, or rather south in the summer. I prefer to do it in the winter, but either way, we'll get there when we get there. But This is so incredible because this is actually going to be the capsule that's used to take people to the moon. This rocket, rather, and this capsule. And it's commercially built, which is absolutely incredible. I'm super excited about this. And further to that, this week as well, the Canadian Space Agency had the Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, make an announcement that they have partnered with NASA. So a Canadian is going to walk on the moon, likely in the early 2030s. Now, you can extrapolate this a little further because we know that to date, only one country, one nation has had anyone walk on the moon. And yes, they walked on the moon. There's literally a mirror there that they placed so we can shoot a laser at it and it comes back to us. And if you have nerdy friends like I do, you can actually aim a laser at it and test it. It's not even that expensive to do. But Canadians are likely going to be the third nation to walk on the moon, which is just, oh my God, incredible. I'm so excited. The future is so bright for space exploration, especially here in North America. Of course, the U.S. has already had people walk on the moon, and their first modern moon mission will be all Americans, but they've said Canadians will likely be on the second trip. And if a Canadian's on the first trip, they'll probably stay in the shuttle, rather the ship. It won't be a shuttle. But they will not likely walk on the moon the first time. And we know that the Chinese are going to have a mission sent. It's likely going to be all Chinese astronauts. It's possible they throw a Russian in there, but unlikely. Russia has no plans for a mission. And, I mean, they would join in with China just because they want to be, in this case, they would be the third nation to walk on the moon. But it really looks like it's going to be Canada. So it's going to be the U.S. walks on a celestial body other than the Earth, followed by China, followed by Canada, which is just nuts. It's so exciting. Anyways, I have a message, actually, if Mother Nature is a listener, because I don't get my listeners' names. Which would be great. Maybe one day I'll have that technology to hack into all of my listeners. But Mother Nature, if you're listening, you need to make the snow stop because I'm sick of it. I'm absolutely sick of it. It has been snowing and snowing and snowing. I've missed 3 days of work this year already because you can't get to work. The highway's just closed. There's a blizzard last week. Couldn't see the end of the driveway. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. It needs to stop. Also, this past week, this was an incredible story, and it makes me actually warm and fuzzy inside. The world's top bridge player was suspended until November of this year for doping. Yeah, a bridge player, like the card game. He was suspended for doping. And he was tested positive, or he did test positive for synthetic testosterone and a female fertility drug. I don't know what the hell he was doing. I don't know. But I just have to ask, what are we doing, people? Just let the card players use their drugs. It's all they have. They play cards for a living. Just leave them alone. Let them smoke some weed. Let him take his fake testosterone and his female fertility drug, Also this week, this was a crazy week in strange news. 1,500 small tortoises were smuggled and found in an unclaimed suitcase in Manila. Worth, get this, so 1,500 tortoises worth 66,000 euro. 66,000 euro! That's like over 100,000 US dollars. Now, stories published, of course, called them turtles because no one knows the fuck the difference is between a tortoise and a turtle, which is kind of sad, but the good news is that all were alive and well, and they're being held in a wildlife facility as officials decide what to do with them. Or, of course, because it's the Philippines, officials are deciding likely how to best prepare them for dinner. And lastly, this week, cops in Minnesota were called to help a man standing motionless outside in a snowstorm without a coat, hugging a pillow. Let me read that again. In Minnesota, the police were called to help a man standing motionless outside in a snowstorm without a coat, hugging a pillow. Now, it turns out to be a cardboard cutout of a local entrepreneur that has been standing in the same spot for months, apparently, And the caller on the 2911 rather said, quote, "I don't want to get too close. He might be deranged." Little did the 911 operator know that this caller was actually looking in a mirror. Now, as I was publishing last week, February 27th and 28th specifically, I mentioned that Orange Man Donald Trump and Rocket Man Kim Jong-un, Supreme Leader, Chairman Kim, I don't know what we're supposed to call him. Anyways, the two were set up for their second, quote, summit, which is a strange word to use, and I assume it's some sort of bad Korean translation or maybe a pun, because these two could not walk up a small hill, let alone summit a mountain. But the plans were set, and they were to meet in Hanoi, Vietnam, a section of the country which is controlled by China, to further discuss whatever they discussed last time. Of course, we don't really know all that was discussed. Now, this is very Trumpian. When he does anything, it's lights, camera, action. Everywhere he goes, it's just crazy, and there's people and screaming and photos. However, when he negotiates with dictators, there's a big show outside and no one allowed inside, which is sort of understandable, but definitely a little bit concerning as an outsider, which we all seem to be. Now, this was a similar event to the last, a little bit less fanfare around it, but the two met this time for a public dinner, quote-unquote public dinner, and a photo op on the first night, followed by a dinner with the individuals involved on both sides. And then day 2 was organized to be a private, shorter meeting between the two leaders, followed by a longer one with the entire team for both parties. That is to say, the Communist Party of Korea and the Fascist Party of the USA. Just kidding, he's not a fascist as long as Jared remains alive, that is. Because he's Jewish, it was a joke. Now, the details are, of course, hidden mostly from the public, but we do know that the first night went quite well. Both parties were engaged, according to photographers and journalists, and they seemed to enjoy each other's company, according to the media at least. But that really shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone. However, day 2, where there was far fewer journalists invited at different stages, it was much more about getting down to business, it was strange. Day 2 was strange, as they held their private meeting for a shorter period of time than expected, followed by a significantly shorter second meeting with their entire teams, and ultimately Air Force One took off hours earlier than expected, and the meeting was cut shorter than Kim's rocket range, as the two sides apparently could not come to terms on an agreement, which really shouldn't surprise us. It was sort of expected, but it's certainly disappointing. I'll go that far with it to say it's certainly disappointing, because I mean, I think everyone's hopeful in this situation. Everyone is hopeful that he can figure this out. Now, as details have begun to trickle out, of course, these are mostly rumored, but we are starting to get more information as to what exactly happened, or what most likely happened, and why talks broke down. And the belief is that Trump offered to remove U.S. sanctions completely and open the DPRK up for trade if they would give up all of their nuclear weapons, material, and facilities. Now, this has been offered by almost every president since the Korean conflict began in the 60s. And Kim's side rebutted and said that they're willing to denuclearize, although it is highly debated as to what the real definition of denuclearization is. It's believed that what the North Koreans believe to be denuclearization is much less drastic than what we in the West believe to be denuclearization. But they agreed to do this only gradually over time and not in a one-shot deal. Now, Kim knows that he has a large bargaining chip here, right? He has nuclear weapons. He does. Whether or not he can hit the U.S. with them, he can sure do a whole lot of damage. And he doesn't want to go all in on his first hand, right? Unlike the bridge players. You don't go all in bridge, but whatever, you get my point. Because he ultimately wants the U.S. troops to leave the peninsula. That's what he wants. And that is where he's likely to give in and give up his nuclear arms, if the U.S. agrees to leave. However, it's important to point out that the U.S. still has bases in Germany and Japan, right? They still have more troops in Germany than any other country in the world outside the U.S. And clearly, I mean, Trump does not like the leaders in Germany. He did not get along with Merkel. He doesn't seem to get along with anyone, really. So, but there's no reason to have troops there, right? We're not even close to that, but they're still there. So anyone with sense really knows that there's a near 0% chance that Trump or any forthcoming president will remove troops from South Korea. And to be perfectly honest, South Korea's economy is so big, and it's actually like a huge influence on the West. And the U.S. helps to protect them, right? So if you attack South Korea, yes, even if the U.S. pulled out, they would still go back. But if you attack South Korea right now, not only are there already tons of American troops ready to aid on the ground, but you would also be directly killing American troops, right? If you dropped a nuclear bomb on Seoul, you would take out a U.S. military base. And if you took out a U.S. military base, I mean, you wouldn't even have time to say goodnight. Like, the bombs would just be falling out of the sky. And if you think that any country would stand up for North Korea in the event of a nuclear exchange, it's not going to happen, right? Russia would shut up, China would shut up, they'd go to the UN and say, oh, you shouldn't have done that, and there would be a hole the size of North Korea in the map. And that's just the way it is, right? We just have to be honest about it. The U.S. are not removing their troops because they know that as long as their troops are there, North Korea cannot touch anyone. And to be perfectly honest with you, of course China and Russia, because Russia, if you haven't looked at a map, does come, their border comes right down to the Korean peninsula. So they actually border just above China, right near North Korea. So if anything bad happened, tons of people would flood into China and Russia, and neither country want that. Now, of course, both those countries don't want U.S. troops there, but, and I really think that they just maintain a face, that in public they talk about how they don't want the U.S. there, but I think they actually don't mind it, because they don't have to spend the money, right? Of course, China and Russia guard their border down there, but they don't spend half of what the U.S. does. The U.S. spends tons of money there to keep the North Koreans just quiet. And we don't want to give them anything. We really don't want to give them, and by we I mean the West, don't want to give them the removal of U.S. troops because it would open up places like Japan, like South Korea, like Australia, like the U.S. islands, island specifically of Guam, to attacks from North Korea, all places we know that their ballistic missiles could reach. Now, it has come out that John Bolton, who is the national security advisor for Donald Trump, assumed that talks wouldn't go well and had expressed this concern over meetings occurring before this second summit. And it's really important to note how these meetings make Kim appear much more like a world leader and less like a rogue agent. Because when the President of the United States meets with you, it's really the best international promotion you can have, right? I mean, his staff say he may have been played. It's come out that they think he may have been played, and he was constantly showing visitors the handwritten letters that Kim had delivered to him. Not personally delivered, obviously, but sent for him. And it seems like Kim leaves with a win no matter what, right? Even though nothing happened, he still gained that notoriety, and he was smiling in pictures with the president, and you know, he was in public and he looks good, and you know, Trump just comes home empty-handed and he doesn't look any better. He doesn't necessarily look worse, but he certainly gave a free W to the DPRK, to the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. Now, this time, the host hotel even had a press room set up with both the North Korean and U.S. flags prepared behind a desk for a signing ceremony. which of course never occurred. And the North's proposal ultimately was to dismantle the Yongbyon nuclear complex in exchange to an end to the sanctions. So ultimately not asking for a removal of U.S. troops, but asking for the sanctions from 2016 to be removed. Now, this isn't all of the sanctions. These were the ones that were, I think it was begun by Obama and officially put in by Trump. However, all experts agree that this would do nothing, as the facility that they're talking about removing and destroying is one of their oldest and may actually no longer even be in use today. And at the very least, it needs massive upgrades. They have much larger facilities now, much more advanced facilities. This is literally like if, IKEA was like, well, we built that store in the 60s. We'll tear that one down to make you happy. It's like, what does that do? You're not making anything there. Like, it's useless. So in the end, Trump walked around the hotel pool outside with Kim, shook his hand, and canceled their lunch before boarding his jet for home. So he cut it early. Now, the real question remains, was it a good idea? Now, the cynic in me agrees with a lot of the mainstream media, which includes Fox News, which talks about how this distracted the media from the Michael Cohen testimony, which we discussed earlier, because Trump was out of the country, and primarily he wasn't available for questions for a damn good reason, right? He was out of the country for the day of the testimony and the day after, and this gave reporters more to talk about other than the hearing. So from a cynical political perspective, I would have probably scheduled a meeting with someone else, but it certainly didn't hurt Trump from the Cohen testimony perspective. But as I kind of mentioned, it also gave Kim Jong-un a spot on the world stage again, the likes of which he certainly doesn't deserve and likely doesn't need. Trump leaves looking just like, whatever. He wasted time and money, it seems. Probably shouldn't have gone. And Kim's father really, really wanted this from way back in the day, like throughout the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s up until his death. I think 2008 or 9 he died, or at least he gave up power. We don't really know when he died. It was a strange transition, but either way, it's really concerning that for years, every U.S. president said no, they won't meet with him. They would send secretaries of state and different ministers and whatnot, because of course you need dialogue. But for the leaders to sit down, usually that's a ceremonial thing. Like usually Mike Pompeo, the Secretary of State, would have sat down with them, drafted the documents, brought it back to the U.S. The U.S. government would look at it, say, yes, this is good. And then, okay, the president and Kim Jong-un would meet somewhere, either neutral or in the U.S. or in North Korea, because, tensions would be much lessened by this point. And we're going to sit down and sign this in front of the cameras and make it official. That's the job of the president. The president is not supposed to be the deal maker. He's not supposed to be the negotiator. That's literally not his job, right? A CEO of a company is not going around knocking on doors, shaking hands, and kissing babies and making deals with, with suppliers. No, the CEO has his people go and do all that, and he just looks good on camera, cuts a few ribbons, right? And then goes in front of the camera, signs the big deal, makes shareholders happy. That's Trump's job, right? It should be his job in real estate, which is the strangest thing. He's the CEO of a company. He shouldn't be the one who's doing this work. The way that it's looked at in business is you're paid too much to do that work, right? The president's time is too valuable, and ultimately, like, Kim Jong-un's time should be too valuable, right? This wouldn't happen with Russia. Like Trump wouldn't go and sit down with Vladimir Putin to bust out the nitty-gritty of some agreement. It just wouldn't happen. Right? Putin would be like, no thanks, man. Like, I'll send my cockroaches, you send your cockroaches, and then later we come and we sign. Okay, goodbye. That's what would happen, because that's how politics works. But Trump doesn't understand that, and Kim doesn't care, because it makes him look legitimate, right? Makes him look really good. And both sides are offering the same deal as ever, right? There's no changes to this. The only change was that the North said they would destroy this facility, and they agreed to denuclearize, which is their own definition, slowly over time. But that's not firm, right? That's not an agreement. Nothing has changed. So it was kind of just a flaw, like, wow, weird meeting to have. But ultimately, I still hold true with this. I said this on my last podcast that I had. Trump will go down as one of the greatest presidents if he denuclearizes North Korea. No matter what you think of him, that is something that if Donald Trump can do, he will go down as one of the greatest. Because then you're right, man. Like the book that you didn't write, the Art of the Deal, like that is who you are and you somehow figured it out. But at this point in time, even if he's reelected, that gives him 6 years, right? He's got 6 years to figure this out. And I don't think that Kim Jong-un is denuclearizing in the next 6 years. I just don't think so. Hopefully I'm wrong. Seriously, I hope Donald Trump goes down as the greatest president ever. I hope so. You know what I mean? Like, I really do. Because this would, like, the tensions in the world need to come down, right? I hate what's going on. I hate seeing this conflict, and it needs to stop. Now, there may not be many more opportunities, and the DPRK's foreign minister said, quote, "This kind of opportunity may never come again." That was the last thing they said to Western reporters before they got on their armored train, because this dude travels in an armored train. How did I not bring that up? He literally, like, travels in a big-ass tank on railroad tracks. This is the most ghetto-ass thing. It's hilarious. Doesn't have a plane. He has, like, a little car or whatever, but, like, you know what I mean? It's this tank on railroad tracks. It's so 1960s. It's hilarious. You got to look at the pictures. And Russian TV mocked the meeting the following day. Like, they just tore it apart. Like, what a joke it is. And it just makes it look bad. And then in closing, South Korea is now asking for three-way talks with, of course, the U.S. and North Korea. We saw a fantastic photo op between Moon Jae-in, I believe his name is, the leader of South Korea, and Kim Jong-un back about a year ago now when they shook hands, and Moon Jae-in crossed into the north, and then he allowed Kim Jong-un to come into the south, and then they walked into the DMZ, the demilitarized zone, for peace talks, and they went very well. But of course, there's still no peace treaty, right? There's a ceasefire, but the war is still ongoing. Like, they are still officially at war. It's super serious. Like, this isn't a joke. And that's kind of why it worries me that Trump seems to be just kind of meandering his way through. Like, if I choose not to script a podcast and I just kind of meander my way through like I'm doing in this paragraph right now, I can make it work. You know what I mean? I'm not going to get shot in the head. I don't think so. You know, there's still a chance, but much less a chance than Trump trying to meander his way through peace negotiations with a nuclear state. Like, this is super, super serious, and he's got to figure his shit out. He really does. He needs to take advice from people. He probably should have listened to Mike Pompeo and at least delayed this meeting, not just done it because of, I don't know why, the timing with Cohen. I don't know. I don't think Trump's that cynical. I really, really don't. I think this was probably scheduled. Well, for sure it was scheduled before the Cohen meeting, the Cohen hearing rather. And ultimately, I think that if Trump pulls out, he feels like, I don't want to be the one to pull out. I don't want to do that. If they want to meet, I want to meet them, right? And I kind of get it. Like, I kind of get where he's coming from with it, but he's just got to be careful, man. He's just got to be careful because this could turn ugly literally in 24 hours. Like, we can go to bed and wake up and they've flattened a whole section of the world. Like, that's a real possibility. And then how many people die from the fallout and everything. Like, it's super, super, super serious. It's not a joke, no matter how much joking I did throughout. So hopefully, they can meet again at some point, or a future president can meet again. And if not, at least the South and the North can come to some sort of an agreement, take down the permanent missiles pointed at each other. And actually right now the South has no missiles pointed at the North, but the North does still have missile silos pointed directly at the South. So, hopefully the tensions come down. hopefully it gets a little bit better. But for now, I will leave you with that, and I'm going to cut out my rant this week because I'm at 55 minutes already. And I just want to thank you all. Thank you for sticking with it. Don't forget to share it. Let me know what you think. Join in the conversation. Send in some questions and comments so I can answer them if you have any on air or direct message. Let your friends know. Don't forget to give it 5 stars everywhere that you possibly can. And as always, ladies and gentlemen, friends of mine, the name I gave to myself, I am Mr. Perfect, Jacob Paveo. You can follow me at Jacob Paveo on Twitter, at Jacob_Paveo on Instagram. My name is in the description below. Go to www.laughtolearnpodcast.com for the contact page. You can contact me there. And you can listen to the podcast there if you are not listening anywhere else. Look for it on YouTube next Wednesday, hopefully. And as always, I will see you next Tuesday.